Welcome to Adoption Matters, a podcast with real people sharing their stories and getting real about adoption from all three perspectives of the adoption triad. I'm Kim Noeth, a birth mom, and I'll be sharing along with Sharon Butler-Obazee, an adoptee, and Sally Ankerfelt, an adoptive parent. As adoptive attuned coaches, we will explore difficult topics and share frank conversations guided by our commitment to truth-telling and truth-seeking. Welcome, everyone. It's getting kind of chilly here in Pennsylvania. We're getting closer to the fall season, and fall makes me think of some of the fall traditions associated with that, hay rides and festivals. And one other thing that definitely comes to mind is Halloween. And as we were talking together as coaches about the different seasons in Halloween, it made me think about one year in particular when I had to wear a costume. I was probably like 6 years old or 7, but I never forgot it because it was one of those costumes where you put the mask, the plastic mask on, and it has the tiny little hole for you to breathe. And then you put the whole plastic gear on that you can hardly walk in. And you're supposed to stay in that costume for a few hours and navigate the neighborhood. And let me tell you, I just remember not being able to breathe in particular with that mask on. And that was one costume that I definitely would never want to have to wear again. When we think about a mask, though, it brings to mind something that someone might wear to hide their true appearance in order to show up in the world as someone else. And thinking about that in the adoption community, frequently that shows up as a survival technique. And as we were talking a little bit about that, about the ways that one can hide their identity and conform to other people's, and maybe expectations of them, we thought we would invite in an expert on the masking topic. So today we'd like to welcome Anne Heffron, and she'll be sharing a little bit with us about masking. But Anne, would you please introduce yourself today?
Sure. I'm an adoptee. I wrote a book about 7 or 8 years ago called You Don't Look Adopted. And then I started working as a writing coach for adopted people and leading groups. So I've had access to a lot of what adoptees carry as they share their most private thoughts in class. So I feel really lucky that I understand adoption much more than I did 10 years ago. That's for sure.
Yes, and that brings us to this interesting tri-spective view that we're going to talk about today, a little bit about masking. Sharon, is there a topic that you wanted to start with?
Well, I was just going to say, basically, as an adoptee, hello, fellow adoptee, I also did quite a bit of masking myself. And I think that's like a double entendre, isn't it? You mask to hide who you are as a person. You want to appear different when you're trick-or-treating because it's a big fun thing and you enjoy it. But the other side to masking is when you want to hide how you feel about things. You don't want to discuss things openly, so you pretend like everything's okay. It's going to be good if I just, stay back here and maybe don't say nothing or else act out, because I'm not feeling comfortable. It could go either way. I also think about, because I was in a community that lacked diversity, I was always trying to mask how I was and how I felt as a person because there was no one else around besides my parents that looked like me. So it was kind of hard, and I just felt like I was constantly behind that mask, So Sally, did you have any experiences like that? Or not dissimilar, but something with your adopted daughter?
Well, I do think the masking goes on, and I'll be, curious to hear from Anne, and also as an adoptive parent, I'm curious from Anne a little bit in terms of, I remember listening to one of your podcasts or something a few years ago, and I believe it was talking about your mother of experience who you wish you would have seen more of her or something, and how it sort of stopped the interplay, the communication, the back and forth. So, once we get there, I would be curious about that too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Sharon, about emotional concealment. just hiding your true feelings. And Anne, I'm curious, as we talk about this a little, what is it that you're seeing, and how might you describe masking?
I was unpacking just yesterday, and I was going through things that had been in my storage unit, so I hadn't seen them for a long time, and there was a package of old photos, and I found a photograph of me when I was 3.5 months old that I forgot that I'd had. And so I'd been with my parents for a month, and I look like sort of a numb, frightened potato. And I was thinking that like babies learn to engage with their parents in order to get attention. And so I don't think I could have existed. I'm not sure if this is true, but if I was a numb, frightened potato, I wouldn't have gotten the kind of attention, like a full-bodied attention. This is so complicated, it's not like that. But I would think that like I would have had to learn to kind of find a spark in my face to get a reaction from my parents that my body wanted, maybe laughter, or because if I look frightened, then maybe my parents, if they're gonna try, already there's this problem in mirroring, because if they look frightened, then I look frightened back. And if they look happy, then they're not in attunement with me. So I feel like we're already in this sort of mask dance of what does my face need to do in order to get what my body needs. So then there's this separation between my face and my self. I was
It's
thinking
almost
about it.
early disassociation, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking about
The
it in
body.
terms of why it's uncomfortable to buy a car. Like if I go to and if, let's say a man is selling me the car and that he needs the money, he needs the money, but he doesn't want to look desperate. So he's going to put on a mask, but I'm going to be studying his face because I have to know whether I can trust him or not. So I'm going to see smiles, but I'm going to see anxiety around his eye and mouth. So I'm going to feel confused because I'm not going to know if it's a good deal or not. I'm not going to know if he's being truthful. And I feel like that happens with all three members of the triad. We're trying to find truth in each other, but we're also all trying to survive.
Great point. We're all masking at the same time.
Yeah, we're all
simultaneously.
masking at the same time.
Wow. Did you have anything close to that experience as a birth mom, Kim?
I think I see that a lot in the way of hiding their feelings. They don't necessarily want to show their grief to the adoptive parents because they fear that the adoptive parents might worry them and not allow contact because it doesn't seem like it's helpful for her. I see it a lot in how they want society to view them, and how they feel about their shame. They will mask a lot of that societal-wise. And I definitely think minimizing their own needs is a big thing that's always going on. But definitely to avoid judgment as well. I think that, the masking will show up in the birth mom community.
Wow. Yeah, it's really an interesting interaction. I like the comparison to buying a car. How we sit back, and even though we're masking, we're trying to determine how the other person is masking. How much of this is sincere and how much is not. And it comes to a point in time where you just throw up your hands and give up and don't want to do anything and hide in your room. Because it's just so overwhelming that you don't have the wherewithal to contend with another interaction that might not be authentic or seem authentic.
Yeah, and it's risky, I imagine, for the adoptive parent. I would think, like, I mean, I haven't been an adoptive parent, so Sally, I'd love to know what you think, but I feel like there'd be so many emotions, like excitement and grief, and so also you're trying to like mirror everything around you, so you don't get to be authentic either.
Right. That's the interplay in what you mentioned as an infant, 3.5 months old. That's an important nugget, I think, to lift up for people, is that this is can be an instinctual survival technique for any baby is to try to read the environment and almost instinctively know if something is going to be, like you said, it had that look of being numb, you said, and
Mhm.
how instinctively your little body knew maybe that would cause the right kind of, I don't know if attention is the word, but
Mhm.
anyway, to survive. And I'm thinking back in terms of my children through adoption and how did I read what was going on with them? One of my children, I'm going to kind of go broad since it's their story, but they were looking at pictures of themselves as a young child. And they noticed, and this is recently, just like you finding that picture, they noticed that had kind of a really nervous, pinched forehead. And they also noticed that the only time it wasn't pinched was when there was a certain person in the room
Mhm.
who mirrored them more in terms of their background and everything like that. And I knew that my child was um, anxious kind of all along. And now I'm thinking back, how did I, how in tune was I with that? And how much, like you said, how much does a parent lean into that? I wanted, of course, a desire at that time to be a successful parent. And
Mhm.
I'm guessing I was masking my nervousness about my child being nervous because
Mhm.
I don't want them to hurt, or I already knew there was a lot of pain. So was I attuned to that child, and how could an adoptive parent be more attuned? It's really like you said, it's certainly peeling back an onion in terms of all the masking that goes on, and there's a protective quality to all of it, isn't
Mhm.
there? Like, because it feels risky not to do it, maybe. Yeah, even as an adoptive parent.
And also what's complicated is the vagus nerve involves the facial muscles. And so if you're not in parasympathetic, like if you're not in rest and digest, and if your vagus nerve is constantly stimulated, and I don't know a lot about the vagus nerve, so if I get some of these words wrong, people can just look it up and know better than I do. But what I do know is that it's a nerve where the organs, 80% of it is about the organs telling the brain how you're doing. And it involves your facial muscles and your eyes. And I know that so many times I'm surprised when I see a picture how tense I look. Like I didn't know I felt tense. And so part of it is like my body is creating a mask also that I don't even know I'm presenting because my vagus nerve is agitated.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
I just
If
was,
this- Go ahead.
no, excuse me. I was just thinking about how much of how much how much of what we convey is not spoken.
Mm.
So, there can be some, like you get on a horse and a horse knows if you're scared or if you're happy,
Mhm.
and how much of that unspoken communication are we having with our child while we're masking or while we've taken our mask off and trying to be open to the child,
Mm.
and the same thing I was thinking about how as a child I was constantly happy. And I think if I was happy, it just forced everybody else to smile around me and be
Mm.
nice. So that was sort of like, I think, more of a performance than it was
Mhm.
about how I felt. So that was my mask.
Mhm. Can I talk about my dog for a minute?
Yes, you may.
Absolutely.
So I just moved and I adopted a dog 2.5 years ago who I knew I'm his third home. And he has trouble with me leaving. So I haven't left that much. But here I don't have any backup. And the first time I left, he barked and I can't have that. So I hired a dog anxiety specialist. And it was so painful for me. I just cried the whole first week because what I am supposed to do is 8 minutes every day. I have this training regime where I do 8 different things and I give him a minute between each one. So they're all listed. So one is I'll just walk to the door, walk back, and then I observe him and I take notes about what he does. And the second one is I go to the door and I touch the door, and then I come back and I observe him. And it goes on. And the last one is I open the door, I go through it, I come right back. And it takes him hours to recover after he usually sleeps for hours. And I felt like doing this, I felt like, oh, this is honest adoption, right? Like I'm not wearing a mask because I'm concerned. So I'm focused on him. Like I'm not trying to create play out of him. He's not trying to create play to engage me. Like we are both working because I know as his caretaker that he has been traumatized. And so it is my job, and it is at great sacrifice on my part. I mean, I can't do anything. I'm in Santa Cruz. I can't go in the ocean. I can't and so that was also part of me wanted to give him away. Part of me, I understood rehoming for adopted kids. I thought this is where I would consider rehoming. Like this is too much. And I had to say, okay, I've decided, and it's not for everyone, right? But I decided, okay, his safety and comfort is more important than what I might call the quality of my life. I have to redetermine what the quality of my life is. So it's not about freedom, it's about connection. And the connection that I'm making with him is so I can barely talk about it because it involves my heart and my whole body. And after a lifetime of masking, this is so real that I don't know where to put it, because then I have to start being afraid if he dies. Because before I didn't really care if he died, because then my life would be I cared, but do you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
the
yeah.
cold part of me would be like, oh, my life would be so much easier if he would just run away. That I have that cold part that protects me. And I'm working backwards from this training with him. Like, okay, this is what it feels like to put connection first and not be worried about this. And it's almost more than I can tolerate. So the 8 minutes, like he's not the only one that has to go and take a nap. Do you know what I mean? And I think that one reason we need to mask is our lives are so busy. And it is exhausting not to mask. And so what I was thinking, I wish for my parents, like frankly, I wish they'd only adopted one child. I wish that they'd had as little on their plates as possible so they could have dealt with a lot of the stresses in the world that come naturally. But often people react to stress by creating more, and so then you have to have a tighter mask because you're treading water that much more quickly. And what I wish for like the adoptee community is that we could all sort of take a deep breath, acknowledge the trauma, and see it for what it is, and treat ourselves with great tenderness. Like we are all in this like sort of pain and love vortex, and it's the great thing is that's I think what true prayer feels like is like you want to sing and cry at the same time. So it's not the hustle of trying to make a living, of trying to get a better car or trying to buy a bigger house. It's what am I willing to sacrifice as a consumer so that I can have a this can be calmer.
How adopt-eccentric. When you described that analogy, I thought, wow, that is the type of care needed if we're willing to acknowledge that there is trauma.
Yeah. And how ridiculously, I mean, I signed up for this program and she said, it's not just months. She said it could be years. And part of me was like, oh, like, well, what? I just bought a really expensive piece of furniture and I returned the furniture because I was like, oh, sugar. I have to pay for this program.
Oh my goodness.
You lift up such, I'm thinking too, so important message for anybody in the adoption constellation, especially adoptive parents, is that we aren't in the same, we don't move in the same group, I'd say, or in the same fashion. And we shouldn't be moving, I don't like the word should, but really not in the same way, meaning connection before anything else,
Right.
redefining success in
Mhm.
terms of being willing to see the long view and being okay with, you know, like for me, I'm rather protective of who I share, how our family functions, like who might be still at home still as an adult, right? And where they might be in the home in terms of all of that. Because I think only the people who understand it are the people who understand that this is a different way of moving through life, and it's okay. And we have to, I don't know if it's masking, but I certainly withhold and only share with certain groups of people the parenting approach and the continuing approach with my children who are adults, and not all the time, and also appreciating the skills and successes and things like that that my children have that go above and beyond maybe other kids too. You know, sometimes I think we look only at some of these struggles, and yet there's all this. But yes, that commitment to the connection is such a wow. Yeah.
And for an adoptive parent, I mean, when my dad died recently, you know, he kept his 3 kids alive. Like 3 difficult, you know, we're all adopted, and just what you said, I mean, it's so hard when adoptive parents have to share their kids' successes with other parents. I mean, I would still be living at home if my parents would have let me, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Like my nervous system, it just maybe in this lifetime, like that would have been good for me. And then to other people, that would look like a failure on my parents' part, when really it's the opposite. It's like, doesn't, like the sacrifice doesn't get acknowledged, the teamwork, like the real definition of family.
Wow. Wow, this is such a deep topic. I feel like we can go on forever. You know, it's really so relevant to what's important in the tri-spective view. Understanding every position. Each person comes with the role they play, but at the same time, the responsibilities that they carry to help reduce trauma and to try and have attuned children who know they're loved, And it's not always, it's not simple. I mean, being a parent myself, my children are biological, but it's not easy for any parent, I don't think, you know, to come across with attunement and intention and curiosity and all the things that you have to do to be a functioning good parent. You know, it's a challenge for all of us, and maybe the listeners that were listening to this today will be at ease, you know, knowing that, you know, none of us have all the answers. We're just putting our best foot forward.
So, Anne, do you see the benefits of masking in at all, or
Oh, sure.
like in terms of yeah, what would you say those would be?
Well, I just helped the Harvard women's basketball coach write a book, and her whole thing was act as if, you know, if you're not feeling it, act as if you are feeling it. And I believe that, like, you know, if I'm waking up feeling sad, it's a tricky balance, but I don't want sad all day long, perhaps. So I'll act as if I'm happy and see if my body can catch up. I think that's you know, it's letting myself go back and forth, but, you know, also emotions can just come from your brain. Like they can be sort of made up things. And so I'm wearing something on my face that I'm actually not really attached to. So like putting on a happy face can be beneficial.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly relate to that, putting on the happy face. You know, just smiling and laughing through life as if everything's okay.
Yeah.
And then you deal with it when you deal with it, but it's not present. You
Yeah.
don't lead with it,
Yeah.
with the issues that you're experiencing.
I think we can get too attached to our emotions and forget about our goals. And
Mhm.
and if our goal is to have a certain kind of life, if we wake up in the morning and we have a certain emotion, but it's not in alignment with our goals, we can consider, do I want to wear this emotion on my face today?
Mm-hmm.
But that's power, that's not that to me is agency. That's a decision.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's not about survival so much as about like, what do I want to get out of this life? It's about aspiration.
Mhm.
Almost the opposite, yeah.
What would you think of the idea of, I'm asking all of us, I guess, if it would feel safe enough for us to approach our loved ones within the triad? And because I see that this might be a great jumping off. Hey, I listened to this podcast about masking. How do you experience me? And just
Very
really
rich.
opening up the conversation if it feels safe enough to do so. Because I'm thinking of that for my kids. I'm asking my kids that.
What a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Wow.
in my mind and heart. I'm gonna lead with that in the next conversation. In fact, I was having a conversation last night with our children and who have just had my grandchild, and we were talking about how our relationships are and what we mean to each other. So that was something, a segue sort of like to what you're saying, Sally. Now, I haven't presented that question to everyone because it's kind of hard. It's not always easy, and you're fearful of what the answer is going to be when, they respond. So, but I think that's a great question, and I think everyone should take the time to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think we'd want to have actually open posturing, meaning even our hands open or something that symbolizes for ourselves that we will be open to hearing what is said and not having to even have a response, but you know, like that. And I also think, Anne, the whole thing, the physiological piece of this could be a great conversation for somebody too, like, hey, I just heard Anne who was talking about how, the vagus nerve and her whole body and felt this. Because sometimes I think for all of us, but especially people who have a prenatal, pre-verbal experience, it's a relief maybe to put some sort of a language and experience around it. Like, oh, maybe pre-verbally I was actually feeling anxious, and now that's why I still have these feelings. So that might be another side topic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Anything that pulls up the carpet and looks underneath it and lets people dialogue about it is so inventive and freeing.
Yeah. Kim, would you feel nervous in your shoes? Just curious to do that as a role as a birth mom for you?
I think in some ways I tried to live life that way, even in other environments. Like, how do you receive me? And how, I think some of that's self-awareness, but that's come with time and with growing and gaining confidence too.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a very vulnerable topic because we don't know. It could be very different than what we expect to hear.
Wow. Well, we have to go ahead.
I just real quick. I had a great Ken Watkins. He was a social worker. He once said that if we do cry or something in the midst of these things, like let's say somebody does say something hard, like, yeah, mom, you know what? You're just so fake all the time. I don't know who you are. I mean, ouch, right? But that might cause us to cry. And then he suggests to say, I'm having these emotions right now because I'm hearing it for the first time. I want you to know I'm going to be okay and I'm listening. So you
Great
can have your
modeling.
feeling, right? You can have your feeling, but you can assure them because you don't want, a person doesn't want to just shut down any other conversation. And yet we are real people who might have a real guttural response to something like that. But I interrupted you, Sharon. Sorry.
No. It's fine. I'm glad you said that because I think it's something that we need to really consider. our responses and how to manage that. It's important. No,
Yeah,
I
and
love,
how you manage the mask slipping. You know, the mask slipped and you cried. And so if you run from the room because you're trying to hide it, you become less trustworthy. So it's everybody being able to bear
Mm,
you without your mask.
how insightful.
Mm.
wow. Well, we have to get together again.
Yes, there's
Yeah.
so many places we could go with this conversation.
I know. We'll have to do this again. I've really enjoyed it. Wow. Of course,
You guys asked such good questions. Thank you for doing this kind of work. It's so important.
Thank you, Ann. And before we close, is there any other points that you would like to make?
I know one quick exercise people could do to experience this. Do you want me to, it'll
Awesome.
take.
Yes.
So
Yes.
my life coach taught me this, and I used to do it when I taught at San Jose State to the whole class. And so it's a way of getting yourself into parasympathetic nervous system, which would be rest and digest. And usually when people are looking with great intention straight ahead, you know, at the computer or at other people. And so their vision is like this. But this is called soft focus, where if you to find it, you kind of wiggle your fingers on either side, and you just make sure that your eyes go soft and you can see so you're looking straight ahead,
Oh.
but you can see your fingers wiggling. So and that kind of vision tells your nervous system that you're safe. So if you go into soft focus, you can help reset your vagus nerve.
Very good.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
I like that that was from a life coach too,
Yeah.
since we're all coaches.
Yeah. I still work with her. I can't imagine my life without a life coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to say it was an honor for me to have you here because I have followed you on, listened to your materials and to have you in the flesh as far as we can be between the miles, over the miles. It's really an honor.
Thanks, Sally. I miss my mom so much, so it's nice. And I missed my first mom so much. So it's nice to be in both of your company. And Sharon, I know you, so you're like a friend. So that's
That's how we.
This is a very safe little womb that you create. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming and
Of course.
do this. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you're working on and you'd like everyone to know about?
I had put out a book called To Be Real, and then I quickly took it off because I wrote it after my dad died, and it was just like a mess. And what I'm reclaiming is I'm taking out a lot of the personal stuff, and I'm realizing I don't have to, like, as an adoptee, I don't have to share everything. I don't have to give my life away in order to make a living. So it felt really good. Like it felt good, and You Don't Look Adopted to share and to see that. And then now it feels good to not share or share less. Like it's mine. It's my life, and I don't have to give it all away. So now it's more about me as a writing coach and what I've learned. And so it feels really good to come across as someone with power than someone who felt that she was suffering. It felt really good to pull that back.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what I'm working on right now.
Okay. Well,
Where might others find you at, Ann?
I have a website, annheffron.com, and I'm on Instagram, Ann_Heffron. And I'll be starting new year-long classes for my writing classes in January. But that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
Oh, yeah. We'll look for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening today to Adoption Matters. You can help others find this podcast by leaving a rating on your preferred podcast platform. If you'd like more information about growing intentional families together and their adoption attuned coaches, or if you'd like to sign up for your free coaching consultation, visit giftfamilyservices.com. We have enjoyed being with you, and we invite you to join us again next time for an episode of Adoption Matters.